In today's video, I'll be channeling my inner masculinity with hopes that it'll help me find a really great sweater pattern to knit for my husband. So if you, like me, are looking for a sweater pattern that will look good on a man's body, then stick around because I believe that these 10 patterns will help you, like the ideal body of a man's sweater, narrow it down. Hello, 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 and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands bonus ramble. I do not usually upload videos on Fridays, but I am in the midst of something here and I could not help myself but get in front of the camera to share with you the thoughts that I have today. So here we are with a bonus Friday ramble. Now, if you follow me over on Instagram, which I definitely recommend that you do if you don't, you may know that I am embarking on a journey to knit my husband a sweater. My focus when it comes to future projects have kind of shifted, and I'm now trying to find that ideal pattern for my husband that will suit his body shape and suit his preference. That's where I'm at right now. And I've come to realize that this is a much more difficult task than I had initially expected it to be. I thought it was going to be something as simple as narrowing my search down on Ravelry to men in particular, and bada bing, bada boom, I've got a bunch of patterns showing me pictures of men wearing sweaters. Yeah, it's really not that simple. And to all of you guys out there that have had trouble trying to find sweaters to fit you or sweaters geared towards men on Ravelry, and I mean like outside of the context of Brooklyn Tweed and all of the amazing patterns that Jared Flood puts out, I hear you, I see you, I get it. It's definitely much more difficult. So I'm here today to share with you a curated collection of patterns that I've found, that I have been made aware of from really awesome folks over on Instagram and here on YouTube, things that have been recommended to me. Ultimately, this is a collection of patterns, 10 in particular, that I think make for really great sweaters for guys. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying not all guys have a body shape like my husband's. Not all guys have a body shape of a typical man. I get this. But because I'm planning on knitting this pattern for a person that looks like my husband, I'm kind of moving in that direction in terms of the patterns that I've chosen here. However, most, if not all of these patterns that I've selected in this video are size inclusive and can be adjusted depending on your body shape and size. Now, here are some of the attributes I was looking for based off of my husband's preferences, based off of what I think looks good on a man's angular square body, and I mean that in all the right ways. These are the attributes that I'm looking for in these patterns and that you might find are a common theme in the patterns that I present here today. The first of which being a neckline that, if it is a crew neck or if it is intended to fit circularly around the neck, it sits high and tight. Now, I don't mean high and tight as if it's like choking and really uncomfortable, and I don't necessarily always mean a turtleneck. I just mean snug to the neck so that you don't have to wear anything under it. A couple of these patterns do show, actually several of these do show some kind of a shirt underneath, but you'll see with many of these that that shirt is unnecessary because the neckline of the sweater sits nice, high and tight on the man's neck, so you don't have to wear anything underneath it. I feel like it's clean, polished, it just looks really utilitarian. It looks like it makes sense covering up areas that might be exposed to cold air. I just like it. I think it looks nice. And I don't just like it on men's sweaters. I prefer it on women's sweaters as well. It's a preference thing. I get it. But in terms of men and my husband in particular, that's what I'm looking for here. I also am looking for patterns that have really nice structured shoulders. My husband has broad shoulders, and I feel like a nice structured shoulder that's created from a saddle shoulder or a set-in sleeve, even a nice raglan design, anything that draws attention to a nice shoulder shape, that's what I'm looking for here. My husband doesn't seem to have a real upside down triangular body shape. It's pretty even, I guess you could say. I mean, he's very tall and slender, but I do think that his shoulders are very prominent, and that's part of, his body shape that I think stands out and looks very handsome in my opinion. What can I say? And so I'm trying to find something that emphasizes the shoulders and just adds that structure there. And honestly, I kind of think that that's a feature that looks great on men in general, regardless of their shape and size. I also want to play with texture or color. I would like to focus more more in texture where possible, but if I find something that really draws my attention with really nice stranded color work, I'll move in that direction. I've been knitting a lot of plain stockinette sweaters of late, and I would like to play around with some texture. So that's what I'm looking for when it comes to the fabric of the sweater that I choose. But again, if I don't settle on something with texture, I will settle on something with color. I also want to see a little bit more shaping in the body of the sweater. I feel like we are inundated with boxy sweaters, and I know that that's generally geared towards women. I get it, but just boxiness in general seems to be a common theme, and I love a good boxy sweater. Mostly on women. I don't think it looks that great on men. I think that men, it just looks better when you see a nice sweater that narrows down towards the hips. I just think that's the way the body of a man's sweater ought to be. And you can say what you want in the comment section about what ought to be. I'm just giving you my preferences here, especially what I think would look good on my husband. And in my opinion, for his body style, and really for other men that share a similar body style, I just feel like some nice tapering on the body. That's another thing that I'm looking for, because I just think it looks nice. I also think it looks nice in women's sweaters, and you don't see it enough. I'm actually adding it to a sweater I'm making right now that I'm improvising, and I think it's amazing. So that's something I'll definitely be talking about more on the channel here, but a nice tapered body is something I'm going for. Okay, last but not least, I do want a little bit of positive ease. I don't like the way a tight sweater looks on a guy. I feel like you need to have a little bit of room in there to breathe. So the sweaters I share with you today will have, I put down at least 2 to 5 inches of positive ease, but we could even get away with like 1.5 inches of positive ease to 5 inches of positive ease. And for the most part, a lot of these sweaters are going to be DK weight or above. I actually don't think I have, no, I do. I have one sweater in there. It's a COLORWORK sweater, and it's fingering weight. So, but other than that, and that's also just my preference and like what I want to knit. But in general, I think that the style of sweater I've chosen here kind of sticks with a heavier weight yarn with a little bit of positive ease. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into 10 sweaters to knit for a guy. Okay, as most videos and pattern rundowns that I usually do, I will be recording my screen. I am using the Ravelry app, which is an app for Ravelry, available on both Android and iOS. I'll link to it down below in the description box. That's what I'll be using and popping it up on the screen so that you can see it here. The first sweater on my list here, this is going to actually be the 10th sweater, is the Fisherman's Raglan by Liv Ulven. Now, this is a sweater that is obviously a unisex sweater. You can see in the photos here that we have a woman wearing this sweater. And then if we continue to scroll over, I'm gonna move over. That's lovely. There. We see it here on a man. Okay. I like this sweater because it looks easy. It looks not only relatively easy to knit, it looks really easy to wear. And I feel like that neckline, though it seems to look like a turtleneck on this gentleman here, it looks like it would be an easy to adjust neck. It also looks like this is a very traditional construction of a fisherman sweater. Okay, so if we go back to the traditional use of fisherman sweaters, these are sweaters that were worn out on a boat fishing. Weather was a big, factor in these sweaters. They had to protect you from the cold. They had to be water repellent, like wool is naturally. All of these things, and one of the features of a fisherman sweater is the collar of the sweater was sewn onto the sweater, meaning the stitches were picked up, the collar was added, folded over, because it would get a lot of wear and tear from putting it on over your head, and it needed to be able to be replaced. And so you can see here in this picture in particular, it looks like the collar is added on after the sweater is ultimately finished. And I believe, based on that construction, this is a bottom-up sweater. Yes, it's knitted from the bottom up in the round, starting with the ribbing and moving all the way up. Sleeves are added separately, and then that collar is added lastly. And I think that that's really interesting. It's cool, but it also allows you to modify the collar, improvise your own collar, whatever fits for the style that you're going for. So I really like this. It's a kind of a nice nod to a traditional classic fisherman sweater. And another thing I love about it is that texture that you see on the front there, that's a really interesting herringbone braid, which I've never knit herringbone stitches before. I've heard that they have a challenge or present a challenge and they might be a little tight to knit, but I think that they give a really nice, clean, polished look, almost like a cable, but without cabling. So I'm kind of loving that texture there. And it's coming in at 11 centimeters of positive ease. What is 11 centimeters in inches? Hey Siri, what is 11 centimeters in inches?
11 centimeters is 4.33 inches.
So we have 4.3 inches of positive ease, which is nice. I like that. That's kind of on the upper end of the range of positive ease that I've chosen for these patterns. Okay, Fisherman's Raglan, loving that, loving the classic nature of that design. They're using Wool Dreamers yarn here, which I've always wanted to try, but you don't have to. This is a really great design, actually, for that gorgeous fisherman's wool that we've been talking so much about. Okay, moving on to number 9. Okay, number 9 on my list is the first one that I kind of landed on when I was thinking of the sweater I would knit for my husband. I feel like this is the one I was gravitating to the most, and this is the Moby sweater for a man by Petite Knit. Now, Petite Knit has a woman's version of this, and this is the man's version. I love the way this sweater looks in these photos. This looks like such it looks to me like the ideal shape for a man's sweater. I don't know if it knits up that way for everybody. I know that maybe it's gotten some mixed reviews in terms of fit, but from what I see here on the gentleman in this picture, it looks like it fits just like perfectly. I love that. I love the high and tight neckline. When I say tight, you're gonna have to understand what I mean. It's just like high and up to the neck. It looks nice. He doesn't have to have a shirt on underneath that, which is a huge bonus in my opinion. I love the color here. It's that nice kind of cast iron black color. And those cables are really fancy, but not too fancy. You know what I mean? Like that's casual. He's got it on with a pair of Levi's, and that's my husband right there. I mean, he wears Levi's. And it looks super classic. Like this. I really like this, and I actually like it even more. Oh, it's a DK weight, by the way. I like it even more because I believe it's seamless. Nope, I'm wrong. Wait, no. It doesn't say it's seamless, so maybe it's not seamless, but it's not, you're not knitting this in separate pieces and then sewing them all together. That's kind of where I'm going with that, and I like that. So you're getting the benefit of the structure of things being knit and then knit together, but you're not having to go through the trouble of knitting separate pieces and then blocking them and then sewing them all together. So I like that about this. Yeah, I don't know, this is a really big contender for me, but I set it back in the list because I know that some folks have talked about fit issues, and it's one that I really have to read through before I decide if it's the one I want to make for my husband. And then, you know, obviously I have to show it to him and say, hey, how would you like wearing this sweater before I, you know, knit him a sweater. And he's just like, oh, wow, yeah, cabled Guernsey. I didn't think that that was something I would wear. So that is by Petite Knit. It is called the Moby Sweater Man. Okay, I'm going to be honest, this next design kind of sold me with the picture that you see on Ravelry for the pattern. This one's called the Tofton, and it's a design by Martin Story. I love Martin Story patterns. I love looking at them. They're beautiful. Most of the time they're knit in pieces. He is a very structured knitwear designer, and I fully respect and appreciate that. I believe that this is different. I believe that this one is knit in one piece and is seamless, which is what really attracted me to the sweater to begin with. I say I believe. I'm telling you it is. I say I believe. I don't know why I said that, but it is seamless, knit in one piece. And it's like that really classic, I mean, just like what you're supposed to think about here when you look at this picture, it's a real classic hiking pullover. It's something that you throw over as an outerwear piece. You just need an extra layer to keep you warm. I think that a sweater like this, obviously, depending on the yarn that you're choosing, it's a worsted weight yarn. It looks like it's knit with, yeah, it's 100% wool yarn. It's Swedish wool. It's going to be extra warm. It's got that long staple wool in there, very rustic. And I think that's going to make for a really nice garment. It's definitely going to be pill resistant, which is fantastic for something that a man is going to be wearing, and maybe wearing it more, I don't know, actively or in a more utilitarian sense. I don't know, take from that what you will. But I think that it looks like a really nice, hardy, rustic man's sweater. I really like the detail that runs down the raglan seam here. It does look in this particular picture that it comes up a little high under the armpit, but I know that that probably is a size and fit thing and can be adjusted. I'm hoping. But just looking at this, the idea of the sweater, the whole vibe of the sweater is really, you know, I'm into that. I really like this. So this is the Tofton by Martin Story. It says up here Tofton men's. I'm wondering if there's a Tofton women's. I'm not sure. That's something to do for another day. Okay, Tofton by Martin Story. Okay, this next one is one I've had in my favorites for him for a while, and it's just a classic pullover design. It's it's another one that I gravitate towards when it comes to just making the decision, and that's the Fort by Jared Flood. There's going to be a few Jared Flood patterns here today. You can't deny that he knows how to make really great menswear sweaters. This is no exception. It's a classic pullover design. It has a nice set-in sleeve, so you're getting some really nice shoulder structure, but from what I know about this pattern, you're knitting this relatively seamlessly until the point where you have to add your sleeves. The sleeves are knit flat and then added as a set-in sleeve. I love the shoulder patches. You don't have to have them. You can, and if you do want to have them, you can make them leather, you can make them felted. They're really, really cool. And I just think that it's such a clean looking sweater. I especially love this photo here. He's wearing it over a denim shirt, and I think that looks really nice. But you can also see from the additional photos of the first gentleman in the pattern photos that you don't really have to wear it over anything. Yeah, he's wearing it over a shirt, but you can see how high and kind of snug that neck comes up. He doesn't have to have anything under there and it would still look fantastic. The body of this sweater, I'm not 100% sure if it is tapered or shaped, but I have a really good feeling that it is. I know that that's a really common feature of Jared Flood's patterns for men, is that body of the sweater is tapered in. Not sure if that's what's happening here. If it were, that's fantastic, because I think that that's an excellent feature. Yeah, it doesn't say that there's any body shaping happening here, but that could be just because it's not mentioned here. But I love this option. It is a worsted weight sweater. It needs 1,275 to 1,985 yards of yarn, and it comes in a range of sizes from a 38-inch circumference at the chest to a 54-inch circumference at the chest. And I think it's a really fantastic option. So that is the Fort by Jared Flood. Okay, this next one is a really great one for those liminal seasons, those seasons in between winter and spring, or between summer and fall, or between fall and, those in-between seasons where the weather is chilly or has potential to be chilly, but it's not outright cold. You can get away with layering a light cardigan over a shirt, and that is the Transitions cardigan. This is a pattern by Yarnspirations. It's a free pattern, by the way. This is a worsted weight design. It's got really great color opportunities here. If you want to do those cool stripes, you could also do it in a solid color and have a really nice, just easy breezy layering piece that's not going to be too overwhelming and warm. You can have fun choosing buttons. I'm not a huge fan of the buttons that were chosen here. I know that's kind of blurry, but I would have definitely chosen different buttons, but of course that's just a preference thing. But I like it. I like how simple it is. I like how lightweight it is. It's really great for the climate where I live in Southern Nevada. We have a lot of days where it's just chilly or cool, and having something light to layer over a shirt like this is really where it's at. That is the Transitions cardigan by Peyton's for Yarnspirations. Okay, this next pattern I've talked about before because it's one I'd love to knit for myself. And who says that we can't have his and hers, color work sweaters? And that's the Varda pullover or Varda sweater by Rauma. This is a Norwegian pattern. It's difficult to find to download online. You can't get it directly from Ravelry, at least not in English. And the place that I found it, I have it, and this was something I talked about on a previous episode of the podcast. I purchased this from the Woolly Thistle. Again, it's by Rauma. It's a Norwegian company. It's using Rauma yarn, and it's absolutely beautiful. It has in this pattern that you can purchase here, it has the female or the ladies version, and then it has the men's version. And when it comes to a really classic color work sweater design for a guy or anybody really, I think this just really fits the bill. It's a fingering weight sweater, and that's not typically something I gravitate towards, but I know that my husband would be more inclined to wear a fingering weight color work sweater than something that's a DK or a worsted weight, just because of the extra yarn in the yoke and maybe not wanting that heft in the sweater. So I think this would really be ideal for him. And I love the neckline. It looks to be a rolled neckline. Yeah, absolutely. And it looks so clean and polished. This man that you see in this photo here is not wearing, or at least you can't see the shirt that he's wearing underneath, and I really like that. It's just a really good look. So that is the Varda by Rauma. Okay, while we're talking color work, let's also talk cardigans, and let's talk about the Switchback by Rachel Brockman. I discovered this recently and I am obsessed with it, not only for a man, but I would wear it myself in a heartbeat. It is a gorgeous sweater. This, and it also too is the colors that were chosen for this sample are so nice. I think it's a little bit long. I think that that can be adjusted. I don't think a cardigan should ever cover a man's butt, and that's not, you know, let's keep it clean here, but I just don't think it looks good when it completely covers a man's butt. And I think this man in this photo might not be graced with a lot of height, and that might be why it's a little bit long on him. I'm not sure. My husband is 6'5", so I'm not worried about it too much, but if you are knitting this or choose to knit this for somebody who is a little bit shorter, you might consider taking out some of those some of the yoke rows perhaps, because I think that's the place that you could get away with it in the most clean way, because that's just a very repetitive color work design going on. I really am not 100% sure how one would do that, but I'm sure that if you look at the design, you could figure out how you can maybe shorten it up just a little bit. But regardless, I think it's a fantastic cardigan design. Really, I mean, that's a labor of love right there. That's a lot of color work going on. And I know that depending on your level of skill, this might be completely out of the ballpark for you. I get that. But I mean, what is something to strive for? $5. The pattern's only $5. I feel like that's a great deal for such an intricate design. So that is the Switchback by Rachel Brockman. Okay, this next design is by Albiona McLaughlin, and I am actually knitting this for myself. But one of the things I noticed about this pattern when I discovered it initially was that it looks fantastic on a guy. There is a photo here where she shows it on a man, and it looks so sharp. Like just a classic kind of top-down. It's not a raglan, it kind of has like a saddle shoulder construction, but it's just that classic look. And look at that neckline, high and tight to perfection. I love it. And I believe that that is a rolled neckline. No, I know that that is a rolled neckline because that's the neckline that I am doing on mine, or at least maybe I didn't do the rolled, but I know it's an available option. It just looks so good, so classic. It looks fantastic on her as well. She has kind of like that turtleneck look going on right here. There are some other pictures. Yeah, there he's wearing it as a turtleneck, which is a real classic fisherman sweater look. Just love that. This doesn't have any texture on it. It's just plain stockinette, so it's really nice and simple and wearable. But I just love the rustic nature of the design in general. It's using Lopi yarn in, I believe, a couple of these photos, and then it's also using Newton yarn as well. So it's a great one for a rustic yarn. Definitely ideal for a man's sweater. I don't know why it's any more ideal for a man's sweater than a woman's sweater, but it's also very resistant to pilling. The more rustic the yarn, the more resistant to pilling, and that's really great for a sweater of this nature. Also, you want it to have that good hefty fit, and rustic yarn's gonna sit on the body with a little bit more heft. It's not going to drape. It's going to look really nice and structured. And I love that about this particular sweater. So that is the Versal by Albiona McLaughlin. It's an Aran weight sweater. And there's also, like I said, different treatments for the neck. You have anywhere from a crew neck to a polo neck to a mock neck. So you have some variety there depending on the preference. So that is the Versal by Albiona McLaughlin. Okay, this next sweater I love because it has all over cables and it just looks really chunky and earthy and cozy. But it's also inspired by the sweater that Chris Evans wears in the movie Knives Out, which I remember watching that movie and thinking that sweater was super cool. In the movie, I believe it's kind of tattered, but it was just a really cool classic looking cable sweater, and this is inspired by that. This is called the Savin, designed by Megan Babin, and it's awesome. I just love it, and it looks really fantastic on the man in these photos. I'll see, there we go. So there's a version for her and there's a version for him, I believe, from what I can see here. But it's, you know, it's very unisex in that regard. Like most of these are very unisex if you wanted to knit them for yourself if you're a woman. But this is just a classic looking sweater. It looks fantastic on him. He looks like he's a taller man. He has a longer torso and that looks great. And it's also great for me to help me visualize because Brandon has a longer torso as well. I love that folded collar. Again, how nice and sturdy that looks. This sweater is knit in pieces, however. So you have all these different panels of the sweater for the cable motifs that you see there, and it's knit in pieces. And I believe it even says here. Oh, and you know another thing that's great about this too is there's a version 1 has that classic menswear waist shaping. So they are providing that tapering happening on the waist, which I think is so great and so appreciated. You want that in a man's sweater, and that's why it's called menswear waist shaping. It's intended to fit a man nicely, and it's supposed to help that sweater kind of sit on the hips and not fall down over the butt like I was mentioning. It's appreciated, it's nice, it's a really good touch for a man's sweater, and this has that, which I love. It has some raglan shaping, it has some saddle shoulder shaping. You're getting a little bit of a relaxed look from the raglan, but you're getting that good structure from the saddle shoulder, which is great for a man's sweater. It's worked from the bottom up in pieces, and then you block it, and then you seam it. And I know that's a lot of extra work, but it might be worth it if you're knitting this for somebody else and you really need it to fit nicely. But just a really great pattern. And I love it on her. Classic looking design. Okay, we're giving the number 1 spot to a Jared Flood pattern. I love Jared Flood designs for menswear sweaters. I just think that he knows what he's doing. This is one I've had in my favorites for a long time. This would be an absolute labor of love. Just when you see it, you'll know it's got so much work involved, but pulling it off and having it fit as well as it fits the gentleman in the photos would be a miracle. I don't know. I think I'm going too far. It would just be really awesome if that were the case, because this is a gorgeous piece of work to have in your wardrobe if you're a guy, if you're anybody really, and that's the Timberline. This is an all over cabled, kind of have that like antler cable look cardigan with a shawl collar that's kind of delicate. It's not over exaggerated. It's really nice. And it looks fantastic in these look at this. And I say it's not exaggerated. I think maybe that shawl collar is just being pulled up on the neck a little bit more. It looks so nice. This to me, it's a cardigan, but it's like a jacket. This would be an outerwear piece. My husband could wear this over his shirts to work as his kind of coat, you know, in the mornings when it's cold. It's not something you just throw on and wear around the house. There's a lot of yarn involved in this, but it's beautiful. And if I could knit a sweater like this in some really fine 100% wool yarn, something rustic that's gonna hold those cables together nicely, it's gonna hold up nicely with no pilling, that's an heirloom piece that can be passed down, you know, for a long time. And I think that would be so special. So I'm giving this sweater my number 1 position because if I had to only knit one sweater for my husband and I had to put in all of that love into the stitches, this would be the one I would want it to be. Ideally. I don't know if this is going to be the one that I do first because that is a lot of work, but I would love to be able to work up to that because I think that is just a classic sweater. Okay. All of that is to say that it's definitely a contender, but here's some of the details. It's a worsted weight sweater. They recommend Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, a really nice affordable rustic yarn if you want that yarn to knit that sweater. It is knit with an ideal ease of 17 inches. That is a lot of positive ease, but that fabric is hefty. It's thick, so you're gonna want some ease there. You don't want it to be hugging in too much on your body. You want to give it some room to breathe because you're wearing it kind of like a jacket, like an outerwear piece, ideally, in my opinion. Oh, and it's using up a lot of yarn. I mean, you could be anywhere from 2,045 yards of yarn all the way to just under 3,000 yards of yarn. So it's not only a time investment, it's going to be an investment in yarn as well. So you really have to think about this one before you cast on. But, you know, when you're knitting it for somebody special, it's worth the extra time. So that's taking my number 1 spot, my number 1 position. That is the Timberline. Knitting for ourselves is one thing. We kind of have a comfort zone there. We know that whatever we get, we are the ones who have to wear it. And if it doesn't turn out right, we really only have to answer to ourselves. Knitting for other people is much more challenging and stress inducing because we want to get it right. I know that can be hard. I know that that can be daunting, and we tend to not even get started for fear of having it not work out. Take it from me, I've been in that place where it just didn't work out in a very big way, pun intended. But we're in this together. So if you are thinking about casting on for somebody else and you're nervous about it, just know I'm completely scared about it myself. I don't know how this is going to work out. I will definitely be gauge swatching. This is going to be challenging a lot of my preconceived notions about preparing before casting onto a garment. I think I'm going to be learning about knitting something in pieces, but we're all in it together. So dip in your toes. The water's fine. We're going to be fine. And I think it's really cool to just embark on that journey of knitting something really special that could be a potential heirloom piece for somebody that we love. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me ramble on about patterns for guys today. I appreciate it more than you know. If you took value from this video or enjoyed yourself at all, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Definitely subscribe. I'm uploading videos twice a week at least on Wednesdays and on Sundays. today was a special bonus day. And if you would like to further support the channel, definitely head over to the Wool Needles Hands merch shop, which is linked down below in the description box. You can find the products listed down below the video here as well. Head over to woolneedleshands.com to sign up for the newsletter. Follow on Instagram, all that good stuff. Until I see you guys again, which will be Sunday for the next episode of the Knitting Podcast, happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.